look around. This crowd that just found what was buried in the ground of their chest. Now it's breaking out, shaking out.
Welcome, everybody.
The quake that's waking up the rest.
Listen to this words.
It's a soul shift, a coded gift, a field full of storm bearers learning how to lift. The veil on the tail, they were told since birth that their worth had to earn itself first. Now this is the reverse. This is a universe rehearsing
about you.
Turn through y'all. Some of you whisper visions like they're dangerous spells. Others yell their mission like a bell that fell from a cathedral ceiling. Crack clean, revealing the raw steel meaning you've been sealing in your healing. Some of you coach, some write, some sing, some teach, some reach through the breach in a person's broken speech and pull their truth back into reach. Some of you build fashion lines, AI tools, new schools, new rules, sound temples with base that baptize as fools. And remembering that jewels, others awaken the forgotten, rebuild.
Welcome, everybody.
And remind them they were never once misgotten. This is not common, this is cosmic, this is tectonic, this is a harmonic convergence disguised as a common thread. But listen, every vision came with a shadow twin, confidence thin, nerves wearing skin, plans made then unmade again, frozen throat, shaky note.
Sound familiar? Welcome, everybody. It's great to be here with you. And it's a little glimpse. Some of you have heard that song. It's one of the new ones I created. And it's about you. It's about this journey, this struggle, this quest that we're on to become who and what we really are and to live the reason that we came for, to live the life that you were made for. And I just want to welcome you to News from the Real World. And this is where we decode what's really happening behind the scenes, or behind the scene, I should say. I just want to real quick make sure you can hear me okay. The mic was a little hot last time. Just somebody post in the chat that this sound level is good for you. It's still an experiment. I'm still figuring things out. So just post briefly, just anybody, so I can see that you can hear me okay. And it's not too loud, not too low. Sounds great. All right, awesome. So again, this is where we're learning to decode what's happening behind the headlines. And I don't just mean what's happening like, here's the real story, the government's covering up. Here's the real story behind the Epstein files in terms of like, you know, the aliens, Disclosure Day, Spielberg's movie, although certainly there's some of that, but behind the scene, SEEN. What is really happening? Because the appearance of this world is not the real world. It's not even close. Now, again, for some of you that are new to me, I'm Derek Rydall, human evolution coach, author of Emergence, The Abundance Project, and my new book, A Whole New Human. I urge you to get that. You can go to DerekRydall.com, DerekRydall.com. And when you get a copy of that book, you're also going to get AI tools that are embedded with all the content, the 10 evolutions we must make to survive and thrive in this age of disruption, and that will future-proof your life, your work, your wealth, and your well-being. And you're gonna get your own evolutionary coach 24/7 and your own focus coach 24/7. So you want to go to Derek Rydall, DerekRydall.com. You'll click on the book page on the front, it'll take you there. It's all explained, but get that because it lays out a foundation that is the manual for this new era. But here's the basic premise of this show, of this gathering, this conversation, is the world is your mirror at a civilizational scale, and everything erupting out there, the chaos, the collapse, the conflict, it's not random. It's an unveiling. And that's actually what the word apocalypse means. As I talked about in the last episode, we're living in an apocalypse right now. But apocalypse doesn't mean the end of the world. It means the end, and Armageddon doesn't mean the end of the world. The apocalypse means what's been hidden is being revealed. The lid has come off. That's literally what it means. And what was hidden is being revealed. And Armageddon doesn't mean the world itself is being destroyed. It means our illusions about it are. It means our models, our concepts, our stories are breaking down, right? So what's being hidden is being revealed. We are in and living through the final chapters of the Bible or of the great books, you know, the Revelation, the Insight, the Apocalypse, and the Armageddon. Not so that it can destroy us, not so that we all die here and go up to heaven, but so that the next iteration of life and of reality can emerge. And this is not just happening in the world, it happens on an individual scale. You've probably been through an apocalypse or two and a couple Armageddons. You might be in one personally right now. But the problem is most people are conditioned to just react to the appearances, to react increasingly to the news, to the headlines, to the media. And the algorithms are designed to hijack your limbic system, hijack evolutionary mechanics without you even fully understanding, and getting you to click and scroll and buy and stay engaged. It's not your friend. It's not designed for your evolution. It's designed to keep you stuck in the matrix. And the way out of it is you have to learn to step back, to get a bit of objective ability to observe and to decode what's really there behind the headlines, behind the scene. Remember, it's called news, N-E-W-S, but it's really olds, O-L-D-S. They should just call it 5 o'clock olds because it's not telling you anything new. It's telling you the same patterns over and over and over again, just wearing a different face, a different costume, and a different set piece, but it's the same story. But the better you get at reading the deeper story, the faster you stop being a victim of this world and start being a creator of it in the global scale and personally. Now, if you're new, I'm just going to give you a brief map of the framework of this in a few minutes that we touched on last time so that everything today can land. And if you've been here before, if you've listened to me for a while or you were here last week, stay with me because you got to hear it more than once. This isn't a one and done thing. It's transforming your whole way of seeing. And there's some new layers I'm going to add today, right? I'm going to show you at least one or two brand new layers that are fundamental. But first, just tell me where you're joining from. Post in the chat where you're joining from and what's got you most triggered or destabilized right now in terms of what's going on in the world or in your own life. Just post that in the chat. I'm going to take a look and see. Yeah, and I really encourage all of you to engage as I teach. Whatever's missing is what you're not giving, what you're not generating, what you're not circulating. Life is not out there happening to you. Life is in here happening through and as you. And so wherever you're holding back, life's not holding back from you. You're holding yourself back from life, and you're holding the life within you back from expressing. And so the more you engage, the more you share, the more you circulate, the more you discover what's in you, what you're really made of and made for, and the more you have in the world. I won't go into the full rabbit hole of that today, but it's the secret to real abundance and wealth, abundance in every area. And when you realize that, you realize you can generate the love, the joy, the inspiration, the creativity, the opportunity, everything you need, no matter what the condition is, no matter what you've been through, because it's all in you. And we'll talk about that. We will talk about that more today. So again, the world is your mirror. You've heard of this before, obviously. Everything happens out there that's happening out there. It has a signal in the noise. Good to see you too. It has a signal in the noise. The same principle that makes your personal life a reflection of your inner state operates at the collective level too. You could even think of it like a collective dream, and you can interpret the dream, right? When you have a dream, you're all the parts of the dream. And you can speak from each part, and you can understand it, and you can interpret it. And it's the unconscious wisdom and unintegrated content that when you interpret it, you integrate something. And that's the purpose of the dream, one of the purposes. Just like memory is old dreams you haven't integrated yet, right? It's the reason you remember it is because you haven't integrated it. You haven't processed it. That's the gift. That's the value of it. It's not to just go in endless loops and feel good or feel bad about how I used to be the high school queen or how I was betrayed and abandoned. That's not the purpose of memory. And likewise, the world and history. Look at the word his story. Her story, history, it's a story, it's a memory, it's a collective dream. Now, most people react to the noise. Again, we've been conditioned that way. We are automatons in that regard. We have no free will, we have free won't. We are in resistance. We are just programs running. People are afraid the robots are going to replace us soon. And I have a news flash. It's already happened. We're already mostly acting like robots. We're reacting to conditioning, to programs, to an old story. And the world triggers that old story, and the lights are on, but nobody's home. We're just repeating and recycling. Again, same day or same story, different day, right? That's why most people don't live 70 to 90 years. They live the same year 70 to 90 times. So that's what most people are experiencing. That's the bane of human conditioning. That's why the great lights throughout history, the Jesuses, the Buddhas, the Zoroasters, the Shankaras, the all these different leaders, and even in activism, Gandhi, Dr. King, etc., they were coming to shake us out of the old stories, out of the old program, to break us out of the matrix. Another thing that does that is triggers, is crises, is challenges, because evolution is always seeking to emerge through us. But most of us have been conditioned to just react. And here in this work, in this journey together, we're learning to hear, see, read the deeper signal behind the scene. That's right. It's like living a Groundhog Day over and over again. So, but you notice in the movie Groundhog Day, somebody wrote that. He has to start digging deeper. He has to start questioning reality. He has to have agency again. And that's what allows him to start finding a new and emerging version of himself, and ultimately, therefore, be in a different story, and therefore respond differently, and therefore create a different outcome. And so that's why Groundhog Day also is so popular, because it is a representative of a deeper evolutionary idea that a writer caught. Same thing with The Matrix, same thing with Star Wars, etc. But in any case, I digress. So I've spent like 25 years helping people read what's behind the scene, SEEN, in their own lives, in their work, Oscar and Emmy winners, billionaires, millionaires, and coaches, teachers, healers, authors, creators, and parents and everyday people from all around the world. And that's what I want to bring, that knowledge and that capacity to read the patterns of reality that are emerging through the noise of this world and ultimately of your own life. That's what we're doing here. Now, again, we're in an apocalypse, but apocalypse doesn't mean destruction in the way we think of it. It comes from a Greek word, apocalypsis, and it means an unveiling. Again, it literally means the lid has come off and what's been hidden is revealed. And Armageddon isn't the end of the world. It's the end of our concepts, our old mental models, our old certainties that we've built our life, our institutions, everything on. You understand? Like Jesus came not just to prove he was somebody special, but to shatter institutional wisdom and knowledge. I would not even wisdom, institutional ignorance in terms of men and women, in terms of families, in terms of money, in terms of the temple, all these things. He was coming to shatter those. People think that he came to show, I can die and resurrect. Ooh, how do you like me now? Look at how cool I am. No, he came because we were already dead and buried in a tomb of old concepts. And the reason he was assassinated, like a Gandhi, like a Dr. King, like a JFK, like a Robert Kennedy, etc., is because he was bringing an awareness and the tools to get out of the matrix, of the frameworks, of the stories that people were stuck in. Real slavery isn't physical. It's the slavery of our mental concepts. This is why Mandela, in prison for 27 years, eventually reclaimed, I'm the captain of my soul, the master of my fate. You can imprison my body, but you can't imprison my mind, my consciousness. And he awakened out of that story of apartheid, of polarity, of black and white, of even the physical shackles and torture. and discovered a power within him and a story about the world and a character within that new story, so that when he was freed, he was freer than the prison guards, and he ended apartheid, and he became president, and he put on forgiveness tribunals. That didn't happen after he got out of prison. He developed that new story. He discovered that emerging bigger idea of possibility while he was in shackles. And in some very real ways, because he was in shackles, because he was constrained, if he was going to be free and not just die, he had to discover a bigger idea, a bigger story, and he did. And that's what all the great lights in any domain have done. And that's what you are capable of doing. And that's not about changing the world, as you'll see. It's about changing how you see the world and from where you see the world. So again, this is what we're in the midst of, this breaking down of old concepts. It's not the failing of all the institutions. It's the failing of an idea that is now outdated. And that's also what happens in your own life, right? This happens at every scale, right? A person that's just waking up individually, in your marriage, in an industry, right? And again, right now we're in a civilizational Armageddon apocalypse, or what Strauss and Howe call in their book, the fourth turning. It's called the fourth turning. So that's like the big view. And then, as we talked about last time, and I want to name it again because it's critical as a key tool that you have to become a master of. And that's that there's two areas or circles to focus on. Two areas that you can choose that will determine whether you grow and evolve in an evolutionary and empowered way, or you become a victim of the current times or your current conditions or your history. You have two places to put your attention. You have your circle of concern. That's everything you can't do anything about, or so it seems. You feel powerless about it. That's your circle of concern. And then, and I'm seeing your comments, I'll get to those. Everything you can't do anything about, where you feel powerless, right? If you live there, if you focus on that stuff, you'll get fear, you'll get complaints, you'll get doom scrolling, you'll get compulsive behaviors, addictions, etc. And the world will keep shrinking for you. Or your world will shrink while the world out there just gets bigger and scarier. That's your circle of concern. Or you can focus on your circle of influence, where you actually have some agency, where you can actually make a difference, even if it's small. If you focus there, it grows. Your sense of being a victim shrinks. As the serenity prayer goes, God grant me the serenity to accept what I can't change, or the courage to change what I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's it in a nutshell, right? So the highest, so just take that in for a second and notice, like when people ask me, how's life going? I say, I don't know how life's going, but I know how I'm going about life. I know how I'm going about my life. That's agency. That's circle of influence. How life's going is circle of concern. I can't determine outcomes, but I have agency over inputs and outputs. And so do you. That's circle of influence. Or somebody will say, how's the day going, right? It seems so benign, but it's like, I don't know, don't care how the day's going. I know how I'm going about my day. You get it? Again, it might seem semantics, but it's much more. It's coming back to the locus of power, of agency. In The Wizard of Oz, they're singing a song. We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz, because. Not because, because. Don't be the effect, be the cause. And that's what the wizard teaches them. You always could go home. You always had a brain. You always had a heart. You always had courage. It was always in you. Don't be at the effect, be the cause. Because, right? That's the hidden code in that story. So now the highest leverage move to becoming a conscious evolutionary being, personally, professionally, and otherwise, especially if those of you that want to be thought leaders and change makers. If you want to be thought leaders, you can't be following old thoughts, right? You got to be leading. You got to be on the leading edge, the emerging edge of the story that's emerging, of the ideas that are emerging within you first, and then in the world. Now, the highest leverage move to becoming that, as I've said before and said last week, the fastest way to expand your circle of influence, because again, if you focus on circle of influence, your influence grows and your circle of concern shrinks. That's a good thing. You're less worried, less afraid. You don't have time for complaining. You're living, you're emerging. If you focus on your circle of concern, your circle of influence atrophies and shrinks, and you feel more powerless, more like a victim. There's less opportunity, etc. Now, the fastest way to expand your circle of influence, it's not to merely work harder inside of the old story or even smarter. Circle of influence focus is a smarter way of working, but that's not the highest leverage. The highest leverage is to change the story you're in. And changing the story doesn't just mean changing what you're looking at. It means, which is often just force, over control, manipulation, which just drives you deeper into the old story or model or framework. It means changing where you're looking from, what you're looking through, and what you're looking for. And I talked about this last episode. Watch that if you want a deeper breakdown of that. But here, follow this logic, as it says in the Bible, as thou seest, so thou beest. In other words, you don't get what you want. You get what you see. Where you're seeing from, what you're looking through, what you're looking for. And you're not seeing what's out there. When you look, you're literally not seeing what's out there. You know what's out here right now? Quantum wave fluctuations and information and patterns, platonic patterns. There's no color, no depth, no sound. Where does all that come from? It comes from the modeling in your brain over time, the neural pathways that have been built that are running circuitry, and the models of reality you've created in your mind or you've inherited. That's what you're seeing. You're seeing your story, your belief, your concepts, or the universal story, belief, and concepts. That's what you see first. And then you project it onto the screen of your experience. You don't experience reality. And this is not woo-woo, metaphysics, mysticism. This is neuroscience and physics. You experience your story about life, not life itself. So as I like to say, we're not citizens of this world as it appears. We're ambassadors from the real world. A place where we're coming from isn't Georgia, Atlanta, Russia, Middle East, Los Angeles. That's not where you're really coming from. Where you're coming from is not, I was born this kind of a child to these parents. No, that's still at the level of the headline. You're coming from a deep place within consciousness. We can argue about what that is and what it's called, but that's really where your life emanates from. Okay, as one of my mentors, Michael Beckwith, says, as a result of all this, you're not here, therefore, to save the world or even to save yourself. You're here to serve the truth that is emerging, to serve the bigger, the higher, the deeper, the truer story. So that's the basic map or framework for becoming a creator instead of a creature or just a cog. But there's more to this foundation that will give you greater agency and mastery over decoding the stories in the world and in your life. Now, until up to this point, I've been talking about the world as your mirror. Chaos is an unveiling. There's a greater order behind chaos. That's called chaotic. And the question now is, well, what's it unveiling? And the answer is that history itself has a hidden pattern. It's not random. And once you can see the pattern, the chaos starts to make sense. Again, that's the idea of chaos theory, to look for the larger order seeking to emerge through the seeming chaos. You can do that literally, like physically. If you look really, really closely at a seed busting open, it looks like utter chaos. But if you step back in the context of the forest and in the understanding of the process of how a seed grows, you see it's an order that's emerging. It's the oak emerging through the acorn, right? If you look at a birth of a child, it can look like complete bloody mess. But if you have an imagine the first person that ever saw a birth, they probably thought it was, like out of the movie Alien. They probably thought it was a monster. They probably thought they were dying. But from the larger knowledge now, we know there's life happening. There's birth happening. It's not, they even used to think of pregnancy as a disease not very long ago. So there's a larger order always emerging. Now, you can also see this on a historical timeline. If you imagine being, back during some of the civil rights movements or even earlier than that, if you look at the Bible and you see in the earlier books, it's talking about, it's like, maybe it's Leviticus, I can't remember, but it's talking about, men, they basically raped and plundered villages. And that was a horrible, barbaric thing to do. And in the midst of that, go and take the women for yourself and all that. It's like that language is in there, but it says, if you kill the husband, let the woman grieve, let her basically sit Shiva, different things like that. It's like, give her some dignity and respect. Now you might go, you read that and you're like, this is barbaric. These were barbarians. They were terrible. They were taking women as property and killing their husbands and all that. But if you could step back, and now we can, you can trace there's an evolution happening. And I'll get to this in a minute about what is really evolution. But so you can look at any chaos, any tragedy, any terrible thing, and if you follow it far enough forward, especially if individuals are doing the work to read the deeper story, you'll see that tragedy, that chaos, that breakdown was really a breakthrough in the making. That setback was a setup for a bigger comeback. But you got to be able to see that, and you got to learn to read it that way. Now, one of the keys to think about here, another phrase I want to give you is, behind every human aberration, you could even say physical or natural one, behind every human aberration is a spiritual aspiration, or a universal life affirmative aspiration. Behind every human aberration is a life affirming aspiration. Okay, so if history had a hidden pattern, the first job is we have to stop reacting to the surface, start reading underneath it. And that's why one of the segments here that I'll be doing even more about is what I call the apocalypse report. And it sounds terrible. Oh no, doom and gloom. No, the apocalypse report is about describing what was hidden that's being revealed. And sometimes demons have to come out for the angels to get out behind them. So in the future, we'll bring more and more specific headlines. And if you have them, things that are troubling you and in the world and even in your own life, you can post them, and time permitting, I'm going to get to them today. But most importantly, I want these first couple episodes, I want to build this framework. And again, you have to hear it more than once. So I encourage you to watch it more than once. And then the more we have an understanding of the framework, so that it doesn't just look like we're being Pollyanna-ish or we're bypassing anything, then we can start to layer in the actual headlines from the world in your life that are triggering you and respond to those. And we'll get into some of that today. But basically, you want to go through a process of, you got to name the headline, right? What's the surface event? And then you want to begin to name and excavate what's actually being revealed underneath it. It's an old story. It's an old institutional idea or framework. It's an old assumption that no longer holds. And We won't have time to go there today. I touched upon it last week about you have a life code, and what triggers you, pushes you, pulls you in the world is giving you an indication of your core wounds. The core wound is the moment you had to believe a lie about yourself or the world to survive. What does that mean, believe a lie? It means you had to believe a story about yourself in the world that was not true, or certainly was not as true as it could have been. Meaning it's a distorted or contracted or aberrated perception of reality. You had to believe that, like, I'm not enough, or I'm too much, or there's not enough out there, or the world is too much. You had to believe some version of that, because if you had kept being the young, naked kid that knew there was no problem and life supported you and you could say whatever you wanted and you trusted what you had to say, your parents would have given you a serious beatdown, or the society would have, and it would have not been ultimately constructive. So that becomes the core wound. It also becomes a core initiation that develops other capacities, but some point in your life, it starts failing you, if it ever really worked. And most people just work harder, work smarter, push the boulder up the hill like Sisyphus. But as I said, you're still inside the old story. You're still trying to make yourself better from the story that I'm not enough. You're still trying to make the world better from the story that the world is a dangerous, scary place and I'm not safe there. You get it? You're still trying to get more in the story that there's not enough to go around. That's what people are doing. That's why it's breaking, because there's a different story. That story isn't true and it doesn't serve, even if it did at one point. You have to, if you want to have real abundance, you have to be in a story that says there's more than enough to go around. If you want to have the courage and the confidence to be who you really are, you have to be in a story that says the world is safe and supportive of me. Do you get it? Otherwise, you are Sisyphus. You'll push the boulder halfway. It's going to roll down and roll over you on the way down. And you're going to have to start all over again. Anybody know what I'm talking about? So you have to begin to understand what's being revealed underneath this challenge or this trigger in the world or in your life. There's an old story. There's an old model for an institution. There's an old assumption that no longer holds. And for you personally, it's showing you your story, your wound, your lie that you've been living under. Now, political trust, economic models, cultural identity, AI, Black Lives Matter, Me Too, woke, all of that, it's all the same thing. It's a form that has served its era, and it's now being exposed that it's incomplete at best, and possibly really just wrong or aberrated at worst. And there's a larger, truer story that's trying to emerge. You know, as it says in the Bible, you can't put new wine in old wineskins. You can't go to the next level if you're still stuck in the paradigm of the old story. Those concepts, stories, and beliefs are the bottleneck to our growth and evolution. Now, like on a super practical level, because a lot of you are, you know, you're trying to start a business or develop something in your life. You can't take a business from 6 figures, let's just say. Well, you can't take it from 0 to 6 figures or 6 figures to 7 figures, et cetera, by using the same mindset, habits, strategies that got you to where you are. You can't go to the next level. And most people are still trying to use those same tools of the mind or even of the world to get to the next level, but they're still stuck in level 1 thinking, which is to say they're stuck in a level 1 story. You can't build a bigger city and expect the traffic to flow on old 1-lane highways. If you want to grow in a relationship, your marriage or partnership or whatever, you can't expect that to happen if you're meeting everyone as if they're the same person as they were yesterday, or as if you are the same person. As the saying goes, you can never step into the same river twice. The water's always flowing, the river's always changing, and your life and the world and everything in it is the same. And most of our chronic problems are signals that we're trying to survive in a world view, a concept, a story that is too small or outdated. Like the challenges you're having chronically are because you're still trying to go to the next level without having understood the story you've been living, the belief, the premise. I'm not enough. The world's not enough. The world's too much. I'm too much. I'm not safe, etc. You understand? That's a concept too small. If you're also, on the other hand, affirming, visioning, and intending to be whole and complete and wealthy and successful and healthy and happy and in love and create a world that works for all, those are incompatible. That's called serving two masters, and you are now in a house divided. Not only does it not work, it will tear you apart. But the good news, as it tears you apart and brings you to your knees, if you're willing, as that cracks open like the seed that looks like chaos, in the midst of that is the new story, is the larger truth seeking to emerge. Now, this unveiling process is not the same as bypassing. We don't stick our heads in the sand and chant and affirm everything's fine, God will, take care of me. We have to name the facts on the ground. What are people and systems actually doing? What is evolution actually built into humans? This is a big one. We won't go all the way down this, but we'll touch on it increasingly as we go forward. But if you don't understand what evolution has adapted you for, you're going to be having all kinds of unconscious programming that is going to be very confusing and frustrating, and you're going to look into the world and see that the same way. For example, in the whole woke culture and all of that, this idea that the male and females are just the same. This is not political. It's not even philosophical. It's biological and evolutionary. Meaning, if you want to say things are the same, we share almost the entire same genes as a banana, right? So I guess I could identify as a banana. And this is not against anybody that is of any orientation or any at all. Hear me out here. I have a family with gay people and trans people and all of that. So this is not about that, but it's about where the pain points, the polarization, the frustration comes from. Male and female evolve very differently. For example, when we look out at men and call them toxic, what we're really seeing is a drive in the male species that even before humans were here as we know them, Homo sapiens, it's a drive to build resources, the male that could conquer the most, acquire the most, and do the best dance, literally, not just in human species, but in male species. That's the male that gets chosen by the female. There was a time when it's the female that's choosing the male, because she's the one that can say whether your genes continue or not. And at an evolutionary level, that's all that's trying to happen fundamentally. And so the drive in men and even in women with high masculine tendencies to acquire and conquer and prove how awesome they are and be masters of the universe is evolutionary. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't need to be tempered or mastered or contained and constrained in certain ways. But if you don't first start from, this is actually what I've evolved to be, and it's not a bad thing, it's a valuable and necessary thing, rather than I'm bad and wrong for having these impulses, or you are bad and wrong for having them. And there's a whole array of similar things for women or for the feminine species who evolved to have more awareness and sensitivity to what others need, and even to be the ones who train the masculine of the species to become dominant. Why? So that the masculine could take care of the offspring and the female and ward off the bad things, all of that. So the female was like training the masculine through a variety of things. Again, this is evolutionary. It's not political. It's not philosophical. It's not even social. It's evolutionary. Now, if you don't understand that, and that's just a super brief little thing, or even racism, if you don't understand that bigotry and racism is evolutionary, meaning there was a time where we had to be weary of another tribe because another tribe could carry disease, and the disgust response and all that is because they're different. So we had to other things in people, just like we have to other different berries. Like, that's going to make me sick. That's going to make me better. I don't know what that's going to do, so stay away from it. That was an evolutionary, adaptive thing that kept us alive long enough to procreate and to become the species we are. If you don't understand any of that, you just think white people bad or European people bad, even though racism and slavery is everywhere in all cultures and all species. But if you don't get that, you're stuck at the headline level in a story that has been generated by human minds for agendas other than what you think, right? And so you got to get below the headline. You have to have a real understanding of what's really behind that. So that's an example of behind the headline of bigotry and misogyny and racism and sexism and all of these things. There's evolutionary mechanics at work. Again, I'm not saying that we condone it, but we have to look at how what we do as humans, we have a capacity other animals don't have. We have the ability to name things. We were given the power to name. Name means nature. And the beginning of naming is the beginning of telling stories. So we can name a thing, we can name it, and that locks in what we believe its nature is. But that doesn't mean that's its nature. That means that's our perception, that's our belief, and it's served in the moment. And then we build stories over all these things. Just like in the Bible, in all the ancient teachings and myths, the sun was a god and it went to sleep at night. It's the same thing. But if you understand that even some of the things we talk about today, let's go watch the sunset. The sun doesn't set. Did you know that? The planet's revolving, and it creates the optical illusion of a sun rising and setting. The law of attraction. You can't attract anything. Life is emergent, but it looks like it's attraction when you think you're just this body separate from everyone else. So whatever the story is, there's a deeper principle at work, evolutionary, biologically, metaphysically, etc. And that's a beginning. Again, that's what some of the great masters and teachers and philosophers have brought. But we are designed to create a heuristic, a simple hack, a shortcut, cheat code way of understanding our world, of taking chaos and giving it order. A story makes order out of chaos. But the story isn't true. It's a tool for the moment so that we don't feel so much anxiety we can't move. You understand? So whatever that story is, and I mean whatever the story is, you have to start questioning it. Because they're all just stories. Stories are equipment for living. But if you're using equipment from the 1800s, or using equipment from when you were 10, or using equipment from when you lived in the outback versus living in the city, you're gonna struggle. Okay, so you got to begin to understand these deeper levels, and then you can, yes, embrace and expand to a positive, larger story. But again, this isn't about bypassing. We don't deny there's cancer as a fact. We don't deny there's corruption, or there's harm, or there's racism, or bigotry, or misogyny. We don't deny these things. If somebody's hurting somebody, we speak to the truth, speak the facts. We see things as they really are. This is one of the problems with the spiritual movement and self-help movement is the way we've used affirmations and visions and goals and spiritual aphorisms to deny the facts, which is not empowering. It's repression. And then we even judge others who are upset, angry, speaking the facts, and we try to oppress them, or we make them wrong, or call them unspiritual. You understand what I'm saying? And so it's not denial of the facts. See things as they are, not better and not worse. Then you begin to go deeper and see behind the scene, SEEN, to what is seeking to emerge. Forest fires happen. Forest fires burn through jack pine orchard or forest of jack pines. And it's a real conflagration. Can't deny that. But it's burning through there because that's the only way it will open up the seed pods with the serotinous glue that is so strong and release its progeny and open up the canopy to let in more light and burn away the detritus so there's more fertile soil. It's a fire, but it's got a purpose. And the same is true with our life, okay? There's real racism and bigotry and corruption and what we call evil, although I'll talk about that. Shit's happening. And we don't just sit by and go, oh, God is all there is and life is good. And we also don't go, those son of a bitches, everybody's evil and corrupt and the elite and the oligarchs, burn it all down. And we don't do it in our own life either. We don't just look at our sick body or our broke bank account and go, God is all there is, abundance. Why isn't it working, Derek? And we also don't go, I'm worthless. This isn't working. You get it? These are the polarities we keep bouncing between. It's like the left and the right politically. It's the craziest, most ignorant, most immature process. You need a left and a right wing to fly, right? Can you imagine evolutionarily if the bird was like the left wing's fighting with the right wing and trying to prove I'm the better wing, I'm the only wing that matters? That bird we would have no birds. They would have died out. You imagine if your brain was constantly going, I'm the better hemisphere. You don't deserve to exist, right hemisphere, or whatever direction. That's ridiculous, right? Well, it's the same thing here. You don't just go Pollyanna, all there is love. I mean, it's true, but you don't use that as a way to get back into polarity or life sucks or life's a bitch or they're jerks or I'm a jerk. You have to see there's a larger whole that holds both, masculine and feminine, left and right. Again, we'll get more to this, I think, in the next episode. We might touch upon it today. Okay, but every one of these unveilings raises, and I'm going to get time to go to your questions, everybody. These unveilings raises the same buried questions, right? When you see this stuff happening, it's an evolutionary trigger, and it says, is this just decline or noise? Is this all falling apart? Is the world going to hell in a handbasket, or is there something trying to emerge? And you do that in your own life, right? Is history just a random walk, or is there a pattern underneath all this? Is my relationship falling apart, or asking me to look deeper to what's trying to come together at a new level? And by the way, keep posting if you got little nuggets. It helps if you like write it down, post it. It helps others to see it, helps anchor it for you. So don't just fall into a trance. I know my voice is hypnotic, but so is my relationship falling apart? Is it asking me to look for something deeper, trying to come together? Is my business or my work falling apart? Or have I hit a threshold, an evolutionary inflection point, asking me to think differently, to expand my model of reality and to step into a new story, right? So, by the way, hit the like button, subscribe to this channel so that, because I'm not going to be, for those that are in my community and I emailed you about this, that's not going to go on forever. I'm going to do it for a few weeks, etc. But eventually you're only going to know about this if you're subscribed. So subscribe, doesn't cost you anything. And that way you'll get notified when I do these. And like it, please, so that you help the algorithms find it. Because there's a selfish reason to do this work, which is you want to get your own shit together. You want to get empowered. You want to create and allow to emerge the life you're made for. But so much of the conflict and the struggle and the challenges in your life right now are because everybody else is stuck in the story, an old story. So do you think it might be helpful if increasingly more people learned how to decode what's really behind the headlines, behind the story, in a way that empowered them, that gave them more agency, that allowed them to live their greater destiny and purpose and be of greater service? That's how we're going to create a world that works for all, right? So share it with a friend, but at least like it and subscribe, comment, etc., so that we help the algorithms take notice, so that other people can come into this fold and start to discover their own next level. But for right now, also, just post in the chat, what belief about the world or about your life do you know you must let go of? Like, what's a belief or a story that's causing you a lot of fear or anger or sadness, whatever? And you know it needs to go. Maybe you don't want it to go. Or maybe you don't even know it needs to go, but it's just causing, pain. Or maybe it feels like it's failing, in the world, something you see that you think is failing in the world or in your life. So just post that in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go through some of these questions before we go into the next section here. I'll start from the latest. Let's see, having and not having and the reaction of such, we can learn to get that all of us having is more eventually. Yes. And again, Lolita, it's like a story. If we think it's bad to have a lot, one would we might look at the rich people of the world and think they're corrupt. We see that on the left side of the political spectrum increasingly with the rise of socialism and things. And so we think the answer to solving the inequality is to level the playing field and to take from those who have and give it to those that don't, from each according to his ability, to each according to their need. This doesn't work. It's a bad story for a lot of reasons, but it's a polarity again. It's just another polarity. And so we have to step back and go, what's a big enough story? Now, that doesn't mean there aren't rich people that are doing corrupt things. Fine. If it's illegal, they should go to jail or at least get whatever penalty there should be. That's different. If somebody's breaking a law, either they should get the consequence of the law, or if the law is unjust, we should change the law. So if it's illegal to sit at the front of the bus because of the color of your skin, well, we discovered at one point that was a stupid law. And so somebody broke it. And so sometimes we have to break laws. But the point is what's the story? Whenever we have a reaction, whenever we have an opinion about the haves and the have-nots, and those poor people, they should have more, we should take more from the government. Well, what's the story? And then we have to question the story. What am I really saying? What am I really believing as a result of this? And eventually we can even go back and go, well, where did I get that story? And if you look closely, you'll see the stories you hold have a payoff, right? If you're broke or you're poor or you feel like you've been disenfranchised, there's some initial value in having a story that says, F the man, and I'm going to use this anger as fuel to build my business or to get really good at some other skill or talent or gift. Michael Jordan is one of the greatest basketball players or athletes of all time, and he used anger. But ultimately, that becomes dirty fuel. It becomes a limited story, right? I know Billy Joel used to always have to have a terrible breakup in order to write sad love songs. That's not a sustainable story. So, my creativity can only come if I go through challenge and tragedy and pain. It's like, dude, we've all had plenty of pain at this point. We probably don't need more to be creative. So there's a bigger story, like the starving artist story. That's a story. It's not a truth. And so we want to look at what's the story behind our opinions, behind our beliefs, behind our strongly held convictions. It's not about judging yourself. It's just about going, what's the story? What's the premise of that story? You know, like a premise is like love conquers all. That's a pretty good premise. It's connected to the reality of life, which is life is all there is. Life is life affirmative by definition, which we went into much deeper last week. So love conquers all is a premise that is aligned with principle. But the idea that good people finish last, or, you know, you can't trust anybody as far as you can throw them, or rich people are jerks and selfish and cruel. Okay, so just look at that story. And now you're in the midst of that story trying to become wealthy. Good luck. It's not going to happen, right? That's why, you know, that lie will act as a law in your life, and you cannot make a demonstration in your life that exceeds your belief or story about life. If you think rich people are mean, bad, selfish, and cruel, unless you really want to be mean, bad, selfish, and cruel, you ain't going to get rich. If you think rich people are selfish and hurting the poor or the disenfranchised, and you also are a stand for lifting people up and equality, you ain't going to be successful or wealthy. Can you see that? Or you're not going to charge for your efforts. And you're going to wonder why you're broke. And then you're going to get mad about the system. You're going to blame the government. You're going to want to take the money from the rich. You don't understand the consequence of that. You know, you're going to literally destroy and erode the foundations of a stable economy, on and on and on. That doesn't mean what we have is the right one. I'm just saying, when you look at the story, is the premise of the story I'm believing based on my opinions, especially the strongly held ones, trace it back to the story, trace that down to what's the fundamental belief or premise of that story. Is that premise going to get me to where I actually want to go? As long as I believe the world is a dark, terrible place and you can't trust anybody, am I going to be more likely or less likely to go for it? You see, so we want to look at that. Is it I am, Wendy says, it's about the one truth, the one love. Yes, and if we just go, you know, one truth, one love, what are we actually believing? What's the story we're living in? And you want to know what story you're living in, which is to say what you really believe, which is to say what you really value. Look at your credit card, your bank account, your conversations, your calendar. Do a forensic analysis of the last 3 to 6 months. Take all that data, throw it into an AI and say, based on all this data, no BS, honest, straight truth, what would you say I value? What would you say my beliefs are? You might be shocked. Okay. Awesome. Okay, I'm just looking through. Let's look at what else we posted. So Caroline says, the current human situation is unsustainable. Humanity will either rise or go down, and level go down. No emotion about it. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that are unstable or unsustainable. And for sure, that's why things are breaking down in many areas. But I want to invite you to notice that story, like that's kind of like the world is going to go to hell in a handbasket. And it's either going to win or not, you know. There's a, what's a word for it? There is a skeptical or cynical frequency behind that story, or there can be. You want to check that. And so that's a story, but what's a better, more empowering story that gives you more agency? That, or the world is going through a transformation, an apocalypse, etc., and there's a larger world, a larger idea, a larger belief or pattern of possibility and purpose that is actually seeking to emerge. And I'm going to put my energy there. You see the difference? Well, they're screwing this thing up. It's either going to work or not. Good luck. Versus, okay, there's all this stuff going on. I'm not denying it. I'm not putting my head in the sand. There's wars and there's economics and corruption at the highest level. What's trying to emerge? What's the actual next iteration evolutionarily that is trying to emerge by means of this? And that will start to give you insight. That's what a great artist, a great scientist, the ones that really have changed history, Einstein didn't just go, well, these are the laws of physics. This is the way it is. I guess I just better find a way into it. No, he went on thought experiments and asked bigger questions. The question is the quest you're on. And as a result, he had a revelation that expanded the story and the capacity and has led to many breakthroughs. Dr. King had a dream, went to the mountaintop, saw the promised land. That's a different story than the story that we were in culturally at the time. He caught it, right? Mandela, well, I'm in prison, I'm either going to live or die if these guys decide to be nice to me or whatever. And my friends out there fighting for justice are also going to end up dying or living. Or what's the deeper truth? I'm the captain of my soul, the master of my fate. What's the bigger? There's a bigger story. There's a bigger reality where we're all one and together. Now let me live into that story. Does that make sense? So keep posting in there. Where is your trigger? Where are you looking at the world? What's a world story, a world topic that it's triggering you or in your own life? That's the headline level. But again, we got to read the pattern underneath, or as I say, the signal in the noise. So okay, I'm gonna go back and forth. We'll see if I get through everything I want to share, because I think you guys are posting some very informative things. And this is not, some of you are now in the hot seat or the hard seat as you post, but please post, because it helps me not merely to give you intellectual, theoretical stuff, but to show you literally in what you're posting how to begin to decode what you're actually saying and believing. So Lindy Katie says, hoping the pendulum will swing the other way towards more kindness, teamwork, sharing, love, green. Now, feel into that, Lindy and others, and maybe you can post others. What is the story behind there? It's a story of hope. Why do we have to have hope? Because what we actually believe is it may not swing, it may not be able to swing. People are kind of shitty and life's kind of hard and then you die. I'm not saying that's your story exactly, but the hoping the pendulum will swing is not an empowering story. It's a story that protects you from disappointment. It's a story that might give some distance between you and your own accountability. So you want to look deeper. And that's why you want to kind of observe, look at your journals, look at the things you've written, look at the things you say in conversation when you're not thinking about it, because that's often where the story comes through. Or look at where you're struggling, look at where you're triggered, because underneath it is the real story that you believe, right? That's why I said your conversations, calendar, credit card, bank account, your everyday actions, what you're really saying, what you're really believing, you want to see that. Okay, I'll come back to these. Okay, so we want to live, to hear the signal and the noise, we got to learn to live by insight instead of eyesight. We got to read that pattern. Now, I'm going to touch upon this. I've touched upon it before, and I'll touch upon it again. But the key here, the bigger story, the bigger idea, the order behind the chaos is what I call the emergence principle, the law of emergence. And as I teach, the example is the oak is already in the acorn, right? That's the principle my life's work is based on. It's the principle that took me from broken, and suicidal. It's a principle I caught in a near-death experience when I saw that the self I was trying to fix, change, heal, and improve, i.e. the character in that story, I could never fix him. I could never make him enough, because the character and the story was, by definition, its premise, I'm broken, I'm not enough. And so the more I tried to make him better and improve him, the more frustrated, the more I struggled. But what I saw was there was another self in there. And that self had never been broken, so he didn't need to be fixed. That self was already whole, complete, and perfect, so he could not be improved upon. Self-improvement is an oxymoron. Now, self-development isn't. It's the development and the activation of the self, but you can't improve the self. And so when I understood that, most of my efforts to fix, change, heal, and improve myself or others or the world was all noise, all static. And I had to get back to the signal, as the Oracle of Delphi said. And it was a woman, by the way, and it wasn't an affirmation. It was a warning. She said, know thyself. Because if you don't know yourself, somebody or something is going to know you better. And when something or somebody knows you better, guess who's zooming who, right? So I had to get back to the signal of the self. And as I did, and as I aligned my life to that, not to the story of myself, not to what everybody else told me about myself, not even to what I was telling me about myself, but directly to the signal of the self, my life unfolded, my mission unfolded against all odds and against all experts. I made millions of dollars. I got married. I had children. My life blossomed. And when I also had to go through more initiations, because there's no end to the growth, more forest fires, it allowed me, by staying connected to that signal and not getting lost in the story or the condition. The condition is just a coagulation of a story. And so instead of getting lost in that, when my son died, or when I went through a terrible divorce, or when I had my fortune stolen from me, I did not ultimately let that become my story. I didn't deny it. I didn't say he's not dead. I didn't say my life's fortune wasn't stolen from me. I didn't say we're not divorced. I had to face the facts. I had to feel the feelings. I had to let the forest fire do its work, but not tell that as the final story. I had to look behind the headlines, behind the scene, SEEN, and go, what's trying to emerge? I didn't ask what the world wanted. I asked what made me come more alive. I didn't conform to the world. I became transformed by the renewing of my own mind and heart, by getting back to the signal in the noise. And the truth is, everything that needs to come forth in your life and in the world is already present, already here and now. This is what Jesus meant when he said the kingdom of heaven is already at hand, but having eyes, you can't see it, having ears, you can't hear it. And he was trying to teach people a way to read, to decode reality. Buddha was doing the same thing, all the great masters. Lao Tzu with the Tao. And so there is in Plato, in his allegory of the cave and the Platonic forms, it's all telling the same thing. There is a pattern to life. And it's always seeking to unfold. Life doesn't actually build from the outside in. It unfolds from the inside out. The oak is already in the acorn. The pattern is implanted first. Then, given the right conditions, it emerges. So there's a phase where the pattern is folded in, call that involution. And then there's a phase where it unfolds, call that evolution. But evolution isn't life just wandering and blindly just making a bunch of mistakes and let's see what happens. There's no actual scientific replication of that theory. We can see evidence of things emerging and taking quantum leaps and, fossil records, but we've never been able to replicate that because it doesn't work. We've never been able to take nothing and make it something. We've never been able to take no intelligence without any pattern and make it intelligent. We've never been able to take no life and cause life. Life is fundamental. There's a pattern to life that is fundamental. It's infinite. And evolution is the process by which it's constantly seeking the next best condition for the emergence of this pattern. And the same true is with your life. And so we can look at history, at story, as evolution. We can look at a seed and its unfoldment as evolution and see that just as that story was already implanted in the author before they wrote it, and you read it and it seems like it's just happening, and there's just accidents and things crashing into each other, and through some happenstance, it just luckily ends up making a point. No, that wouldn't be a story. It wouldn't be a good thing. It wouldn't be a story that works at all. Same thing with life. So it's always seeking to emerge, always seeking the best condition. That's what I teach with the life code, that your life story encodes your life's work. It's not an accident. It's a preparation, but you got to learn to read it and to decode the pattern. Now, I know this is controversial. Scientists would disagree, but it's literally Occam's razor, which is the most obvious hypothesis, because everything starts with a seed. Everything. Nothing comes from nothing. Everything comes from a pattern, whether it's a person, a plant, an animal, an identity, a story. Again, so you can apply that to history. And instead of reading history as a chain of accidents and personalities, one damn thing after another, including your own history, you read it through emergence, and suddenly you see something else. There's a seed of something that was planted in me before I was planted in my mother's womb. Now, we don't want to get in, I'm not talking about necessarily, what's the term, the design, I forget the theory about, that Christians bring forth about design. It's not a design exactly in that way, but there's a pattern. In you, in earth, in all of us, in cultures, in countries. And what we call history is that process of life trying to create the next best condition through us. There's nature doing it through nature, and there's life trying to reveal the highest pattern of humans through humans. And it's not a bunch of separate things. It's a bunch of branches of one tree. It's like that species where it looks like there's a field of all these separate trees, but if you go underground, they're all connected. It's one species. It's one thing. That is where the oneness really is. And it's emerging through us individually. There's a pattern, and it's already done. It's already figured out in this infinite intelligence or universal mind or whatever you want to call it, the quantum field. And it's not linear. It's not like a movie script where exactly these are the words that have to be said. So you have to sit with this for a while to really understand this in a non-linear way. But implicit to this principle is that it's already here. You've already got it. You are already whole, complete, and perfect, and you brought everything you need with you, and so did the world. But it needs us to get back in touch with that signal, not get caught up in the noise. It needs us to see behind the scene, SEEN, not get caught up in the appearances. Having eyes you see not, having ears you hear not. Judge not by appearances, but judge righteous judgment, which means discern spiritually or more intuitively the story behind the stories. As Dr. King said, the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. He was implicitly describing there's a pattern. As Einstein said, you must decide if all of life is a miracle or none of it is. I broke that down in the last episode about really understanding that how can you believe a story and align with a story that is totally life affirmative? You have to have some degree of understanding why that's true. Life is all there is, and therefore life can never create anti-life. Life can never go against itself. All of life is for life. The meaning of life is the ever greater, ever expanded expression of life and of the patterns of life. And you are an emanation, an expression, an individualization of that. If you want to go deeper, watch the last episode. Okay? And of course, if you're a creator, a writer, a songwriter, or just whatever, an entrepreneur, you know this. I know this principle is real. Before I write a story or in the process, I have to first identify the seed idea of it, the theme. Like I said earlier, love conquers fear, or love conquers all. And that becomes the spine of the whole story, of every character, scene, conflict, and condition of the story, ultimately designed to prove that premise dramatically. Life is similar. When you understand that deeper premise of your life, you can start designing a life that is in alignment with that. And then you can use the world as a mirror to show you where you're out of alignment with who and what you really are. And then it's all just grist for the transformational mill, right? And you begin to understand behind every human aberration is a spiritual or life affirmative aspiration. And if you haven't yet, write that down. Behind every human aberration is a spiritual or life affirmative aspiration. Underneath the distorted, the broken, the ugly, it's a real longing that got hijacked or twisted along the way. The aspiration is true. The aberration is what happens when that aspiration is captured or filtered through fear, through the survival brain, through the false story. What I called in the last episode, the egoic program of survival. When that aspiration is channeled through that, you get what appears to be wars and conflicts and corruption and all of that. But even in the midst of that, something's trying to emerge and still can, right? One of the most extreme examples is like Hitler. Hitler was responding to a deeper spiritual aspiration, the idea of a perfect human. But coming through a deranged, fragmented, distorted identity and story, he imposed it in a destructive way, right? So the idea was real, that there is a perfect pattern to humans and to humanity. But coming through a distorted, fragmented, separate psyche, it looks like destruction. And the same thing is happening in your life right now around areas that you're struggling with. Now, again, naming the aspiration, seeing what's seeking to emerge. And by the way, when you look at history, you see that terrible thing and that terrible person actually created the condition for evolution and a better leader, a better culture, a better world. And if you look at your own life, that disease, that loss of a job, that a tragedy, if and especially if you're doing the work to evolve and read the deeper story, that becomes the forest fire that allows you to crack open and to grow and evolve. Now, again, we're not excusing the bad behavior, and our drive and desire to end cruelty and end bad behavior is also part of the legitimate pattern. But you have to understand, you have to come from the higher story if you're going to be a thought leader, a change maker, or just affect real change in your life or in the world. Jesus couldn't heal anybody if he saw a sick person. Mother Teresa would never go to an anti-war protest, only a pro-peace one. Mandela couldn't have become president and ended apartheid if he just came out from the old story and started locking people up and executing them. Right? So you have to come from. Remember I said before, you don't get what you want, you get what you see. You don't get what you're looking at, you get what you're looking from, looking through, and looking for. Mandela was looking from a larger story of oneness, of peace, of his own integration, no longer just coming from the wounded place. He was looking through the strategies and capacities that evolved, and he was looking for an opportunity for real peace and justice. Okay? So same with Dr. King, Gandhi, etc. So we don't excuse the bad stuff, but we don't want to react and attack and tell a story about those terrible bad people and the terrible bad world. By the way, evil, as I think I said last time, evil is live spelled backwards. Evil is when you are using the principle of life backwards from that distorted, fragmented, egoic place. That's what you get. Just like if you wire your wires backwards and you plug in something, you'll blow up, you'll blow out the system, or at the very least, you won't get any electricity or light. It's like, oh my God, my karma, or why is God punishing me? No, you wired it backwards. And so if you're telling a story that's backwards, meaning it's antithetical to life, you're going to experience evil. Does that make sense? Post if this is making sense. So we're not justifying harm and things, but we're understanding what does it really take to redeem it. It takes a bigger story. And if you look at history, the people that have changed the world in any domain, technologically, scientifically, religiously, spiritually, socially, etc., they didn't do it in a sustainable way through war. They did it through an expanded story. Okay? So again, I'm just a little teaser for the next episode, where we're going to talk about how this all hinges on, in nature, this unfolding is instinctual, right? The acorn doesn't have to choose to become an oak. It can't go against its nature. But we're different. We have agency. We have consciousness. And at this stage, evolution isn't going to happen to us anymore. It has to happen through and as us. We have to do this consciously. And we'll come back to that. But I just want you to, again, notice, and I want you to become a student as much as you can. We're all busy. We have other things to do. But of history, of people in history, of why and how and where and when things took a leap, and a quantum leap, not just incremental. And if you read history in this way, a pretty remarkable thing shows up. You see in eras when individuals and then groups came together, it was rarely ever one individual. It started with one who was able to listen and hear and feel into the deeper pattern, the signal and the noise, the world that was seeking to emerge. And then they told that story. They operated from that story. And that activated, it became a homing beacon for those who were also feeling that story, but they couldn't name it. And they would come together in small groups. Jesus was a small group at first. Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement, small group. The Renaissance, the Impressionist era, the Hollywood, whatever they were called, the Hollywood brats, Spielberg and Lucas and Coppola, just a few people, transformed the entire cinematic world. In each of these domains, they started with an individual and or a small group or just two, and they had the courage to live from a deeper story. And they were called crazy and insane and unbalanced. Einstein was. They were rejected. They were fired. They weren't given money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this happened in my life in a smaller way when I had this awakening, and my family thought I was crazy, and my friends thought I was crazy, and they were scared for me. And I joined a cult, and I'm going to die, and I'm never going to succeed, and all these different stories they were putting on me. And I had to have the courage to keep hearing the signal and keep walking that path, sometimes alone. And what happened is, I integrated it enough that was the homing beacon. That was the signal I was now putting off. And one by one, people showed up and I was drawn to, and now there was a small group around me. And now there's hundreds of thousands of people around me. But also my family eventually came back, but they didn't come back in the old story. They came back at the new story, right? So that's the power. That's why the pen is mightier than the sword, right? Your story. That's why a great story, a myth, this is what the story or the book Homo Sapien, Yuval Harari, he's talking about the power of story. He's talking about also the dangerous power of story, right? The story of money, the story of this, that, or the other. But your story, the story you tell, the story you live and ultimately embody, that determines the life you experience. And that also becomes a homing beacon. And when I teach people the life code work and how to understand the workshop you've been living is the one you're meant to be giving, and when you embody the life's work encoded in your life story, it's a homing beacon. That life code attracts your tribe, your partners, your people, because they're part of that new story also. You understand? And when people have done that in history, if you read history, quantum leaps always took place. The axial age, the flowering of the Renaissance, the scientific revolution or enlightenment, the long arc of abolition and civil rights. In each of those, people stopped defending the old form or just merely fighting it. And they started serving what was trying to emerge, the difference between Malcolm X and Dr. King. Now, Malcolm X eventually had a transformation, but you see the difference, right? And so instead of fighting it or fearing it or fleeing it, you want to instead seek to decode the signal and the noise, the pattern that is emerging. What is it telling you about who you are, what you're made of and made for? What is it telling you about what the world really is? And you can begin to look at other people that either you have issues with or that you care about that are struggling. And instead of just trying to help them and save them, you can start to discern what is really trying to emerge in them. And then instead of saying, stop doing that, or why is this happening, or let me save you, you can begin to feed the seed of what's really emerging in them. By the way, this is the best level of teaching and coaching and the highest level of healing. It is the consciousness of wholeness that heals. So when you see a person for who they really are, you don't deny where they are, you meet them where they are, but you see for who they really are, what's emerging, and you feed that seed, that story, instead of the story they're telling, magic happens. As a coach, as a teacher, as a healer, as a parent, as a friend, right? And of course, doing that for yourself. So let's take a breath. I know this is a lot. And again, post in the chat, what are the big stories? In fact, we can even do some of this right here is, this is a way to apply it. For any event in the news or in your own life, I want you to ask a few questions based on everything we just talked about. What aspiration? Remember, the question is the quest you're on. So you don't want to ask a question, the result of which you don't want. Like, why am I so messed up? You'll get an answer. Here's why, because you suck. Great, right? Why am I so broke? You want to ask a question like, what's really trying to emerge in me? What's the aspiration that is seeking to emerge through this seeming aberration in the world or in my life? Now you can see you can start to get the answers, like the bigger pattern, the bigger idea, the better story. Now that's not the same question as saying, why is this happening in the world? Whose fault is it? You'll get answers. But why is this happening? Why is Trump bombing Iran, if you don't like Trump, or even if you do? You'll get answers, but you won't necessarily get a better story. Well, it's because Israel's doing it, and it's this whole cabal of people seeking to claim oil. That might be true on the facts with a little t, but again, how does that feel? Is that getting you closer to the life you want or the difference you're here to make? But if you asked, and I'm not saying that those aren't layers you may not have to dig down through to get to the well within you, but you want to say, if I get the answer to this question, will it get me closer to the results I want? Will it lead to the inputs and outputs that give me a better chance on the outcomes that I want? And I'm telling you, if you start looking this way, you'll notice a lot of the questions you're asking won't. Like, why is this happening to me? What's wrong with me? Why don't they like me? Why am I broke? Why am I not? Instead of, how can I make more money in an authentic and purposeful way? How can I become healthier than ever before in a joyful and expanded way, etc. Right? So again, question one, what aspiration has become distorted inside this aberration? What's the real longing buried underneath the broken expression? So that's a question you can ask. What condition is life trying to create through this disruption? Remember, the premise is life affirmative. So you can't be, well, life's just trying to destroy us all. That's not, you're starting from a false premise. You're not starting from a life affirmative premise. And again, how does that make you feel? Life's trying to destroy us all. Okay, let's play with that for a while. How does that work? How's that working for you? Right. So what condition is life trying to create through this disruption? I wonder if I can, give me 1 second. Actually, I'm going to post these here. See if I can post these here. I don't think I posted these last time, or these are different questions, but I'm going to post these. See if that goes through there. All right. So there you go. So what aspiration is trying to emerge through this seeming aberration? What condition is life trying to create by means of this disruption? Remember the forest fire burning the jack pines. It needs that extreme heat to open up the seed pods and release the progeny, to burn away and let in more light through the canopy, to burn away the detritus and create more fertile soil. It's doing all these amazing things through that disruption. So you can ask that about your own life. You can ask that about any situation in the headlines. What's being cleared away? That's the detritus. What's being exposed or made possible to ignore? And that's also important, right? Sometimes, like, you have to get punched in the face. I'm sorry to say, but humans are stubborn and resist change like crazy. And like, when you get punched in the face, when you get knocked down, knocked out, fired, you should come home and your partner is left. Hopefully you don't wait till it gets there, but something is time to talk to you. You know, the old saying, it comes as a whisper, then it's a tap on the shoulder, then a 2x4 to the head. But even then, in that tragedy or challenge or crisis, you can still ask the question, what is life trying to create through this disruption? What is in me trying to emerge? Or again, if you're looking at the world. And by the way, another little side reason why looking to see how the world affects you and letting it affect you initially is because it's a mirror. So if you're really angry about what's happening over here, or really heartbroken about what's happened over here, or really want to just withdraw and look away and not look over here, all of that is a signal that there's something about that is about you, that will allow you to first transform your own life, get down to the deeper story of your own life. And secondly, very well might be the place you're meant to serve, or tell a story, or write a song about, or build a business to solve. So you don't want to look away, but you do want to build the foundations, because if you don't have these foundations and you look at the mirror, you're not going to like what you see and you're going to get sucked into the story. That's why I'm doing this. It's a training. You have to build that. So all of this is happening out there, but it's also happening in you. And we're not going to go to this week, but we'll talk more about it. We touched on it last week. But again, one of the ways to know what stories in my life or in the world are things I should pay attention to, it's the ones that trigger you. And eventually you want to become trigger happy, right? What bothers us is trying to better us. It's trying to show us a part of ourselves. Whatever pushes or pulls you is a projection of some unintegrated part of you, either the dark shadow or the light shadow. Like, I hate that guy. He's a selfish guy. That person is stupid, mean, shallow, unspiritual, corrupt, selfish. They're ruining the world. That's all the dark shadow. Or the light shadow. Oh my God, they're so amazing. I admire them. I wish I could have sex with them. I wish I could have dinner with them. I wish they'd be my partner. I wish I could be like them. Jealous, envious. That's the light shadow. That's trying to show you positive qualities you've rejected or repressed. And this other one is trying to show you negative qualities. If you learn to read that, and then again, we'll talk about this next time, learn to discover those parts in you, the shadows, you can also discover they're part of a larger story. And this is a process by which you will keep waking up. You won't just watch the news and be drained and broken and angry and sad and pissed off and broken down and worn out. You'll do it. You'll titrate the dose so you don't overdose, and it'll be like, whoa, I didn't know that about me. Wow. Oh my God. And now you'll go in and do the work and you'll see, I've been holding on and believing this story that rich people are bad and that they're ruining the world. And I'm wondering why I'm always struggling, or that men are jerks, or that women are jerks, or that whatever. And now I see Or this thing has been breaking my heart. Why doesn't somebody do something about this? And now I see that when I see those children being abandoned or rejected, that's triggering a wound about the way my inner child has been feeling my whole life. And I want to help those people because it's a proxy for the help I need to give myself. And then maybe I'm actually also meant to help those kids, etc. So it's all conspiring. The whole world is conspiring for your awakening and for your activation and development of your potential and your purpose. Everyone and everything is working for you, especially the ones that piss you off. In an oyster, you know how a pearl happens? By the oyster getting some sand in there, and it agitates it and it irritates it. So, and it doesn't make a story up. Why me? Why did I get sand in my crotch? This isn't fair. Why have you forsaken me? Those terrible, whatever. It just has a natural response to start working with the sand, and it excretes this liquid and this material that eventually forms a pearl. Right? This is also, if you understand that, now you think about like the Christian teachings, the pearl of great price. What would a man sell for that? Everything. What's the pearl of great price? It's not just intellectual truth. It's an embodied realization of heaven or truth that is forged when you are in the world, but no longer of it. When you are able to look at the thing and see the truth behind it and act from the truth, not react to the appearance, to the headline. You build and develop a pearl of wisdom. And there's nothing more valuable than that, because that sets you free. That allows you to be free and to be you and to be fully expressed and fully alive and to love and to serve and to create without limits, no matter what anybody does or says. And as a result, you become a light of the world, or at least in your own life or family. So this is what News from the Real World is about. It's about helping you become an ambassador from the real world so that your very consciousness becomes an embassy of truth, peace, love, abundance, generosity, service, creativity. And anybody that enters into your mind, not just your physical life, but that person on the news, there's anything that enters through the door of your consciousness, they're now in you. They're in your embassy. Your consciousness is your embassy. How are you treating and thinking about and talking about all the characters and situations in your embassy? Well, if you're an ambassador from heaven, which means ever expanding good, an ambassador from the real world, you're meeting them with understanding, compassion, empathy, love, and ultimately service. So that's what we're building. And if you like this, please let people know. Smash that like button. Subscribe so I can keep you posted. Tell people about this so the algorithm can find out. Comment. Go watch other videos on this channel. All of this is in an attempt, if you believe this is valuable to you, and you can see and resonate that if others could learn to read the world this way, we could actually make some progress, because we'll be telling a better story about everybody. A story that is uplifting, inspiring, and life affirmative, but not Pollyanna. We're not BSing. There's some stuff going down and it needs to change, but you can't change it at the level of the old story. As Einstein said, you cannot solve a problem at the level of thinking that created it. So if we want to solve the world's problems, we have to get out of the old story so that we're coming from the mountaintop, from I am the captain of my soul and the master of my fate, from wholeness, oneness, looking through strategies and capacities that engenders in us, and looking for evidence of the new world, evidence of the truth, evidence of the good. And that's how you transform your life. That's how you transform others. And that's how we ultimately create a world that works for all and create a whole new story that includes everybody. Yes? So, if you can't find last week's episode, look under the lives. It hasn't been posted separately to the videos. So always check the lives. And we're going to try to also post them over to the regular video channel as well. But post in the chat, watch the other videos, share it with a loved one. You can post a link on your own social media if you really believe in this. You don't have to do any of that. But at the very least, subscribe, because I'm not going to be emailing people forever, so that you get notified about this. And I want to, again, just to do a little bit of Q&A here, post in the chat, again, what in the news or in the world is triggering you the most right now? What's angering you, scaring you, breaking your heart? Or it might even be a positive trigger, as I talked about. Who are you admiring, jealous of, wish you were like, etc.? Just post in the chat. If you already posted up above and I didn't respond to it, you can post it again. I'm actually going to pull up something out of these notes here and see if I can post this in the chat so you guys also have that. So this is like a basic framework also again. See if I can get that, if it'll take all of that. I'm not sure how many characters I can put into the chat. Okay, I think it's showing up. Yeah, okay, great. So I just posted in the chat also some of the steps. I'm trying to, give you prompts and different ways to look at this. Oh, I forgot. I'm in my casual Thursdays. I remember when I used to do videos and I would have, tank top on or whatever, and people are like, "Who are you, the tank top guru?" So I'm embracing. It's not a tank top, but my sleeveless. What? You can't afford sleeves? My dad used to say that to me. Okay, let me just see here. Some of the things you're posting. Yeah, what's happening to America? My story is that ADHD is limiting me. So that's great, and I have a bunch of friends who have that story, and it's always tricky because, first of all, there's no shaming or blaming or judging. And there are neurological and physiological and biological and genetic and things that we have to actually deal with, right? I have some genetics that aren't so good, and it's caused me problems. So I'm not going to deny and act like they don't exist. But it's like, what's the larger story? Just like, again, like the example with my son, or the example with losing my fortune initially at a time. I could have told the story, the world's unsafe and corrupt and I can't trust anybody and I'm an idiot and I'm screwed and blah, blah, blah. And I did tell that story for a minute. I was sad. I was angry. It hurt. But knowing what I know and knowing the principles and knowing the process, I kept asking, what's the real story trying to emerge? And what I eventually discovered is it was another iteration for me of where I was making outer symbols my source. Money is not wealth. It's a symbol of wealth, like the fruit on a tree. And the fruit on a tree is the outer manifestation of the tree's abundance, of really Earth's abundance, life's abundance. It's not the wealth. The wealth is in the roots. The wealth is in the soil. The wealth is in the air. The wealth is in consciousness, in the field. And that tree is just a unique instrument for transmuting wealth into fruit. Same thing is true with dollars. And this is what I teach in Awakened Wealth. And I came back, I'm like, oh, I'm being initiated into another level of mastery where I've slipped and made things my source and maybe got greedy or just lost sight. And even if I didn't, this is an opportunity. Do you really believe what you said you believe? Do I really believe that wealth is consciousness and therefore I have infinite abundance and I can never lose anything, or I can never have more or less? It's infinite. And I'm okay, let's dig in and let's do the work. And as a result, I am expanded and more deeply embodied that belief or that knowing that is life affirmative. And I built back, and I'm wealthier now today in physical form than I was then. And the same thing with the even more difficult thing with my son, losing a child, the love of my life. And I think I shared this last time, 3 years into it, after crying every day and doing the work and going, there is no way around this. He's gone. I've lost him, or whatever my story was. And the voice dropped in one day while walking and said, when the form that held your love shatters, the love is not lost, it is liberated. And it blasted me open. And I began to see, first of all, I cried and laughed for a while. And I felt this love expand. It was too big for me to contain. And I realized that's true with everything. All forms hold that quality of our life, whether it's wealth, whether it's health, whether it's, we think health, we think the body and the organs are the form of health. But when you have a transformation, sometimes through disease, and you discover health is infinite, life eternal, the body isn't the source of health. It's just a short-term container. Health is consciousness. Just like wealth is consciousness, the dollars, the bank account, that is not wealth. It's a container. It's a symbol. Likewise, relationships and people are not the source of love and companionship. They are temporary containers and vehicles, but love and companionship is infinite. And as a result of that, my capacity to love, to forgive, to have compassion and empathy for myself and others took a quantum leap. So this is the possibility. So ADHD, even if it's literally diagnosed neurologically and otherwise, what's the larger story? Because of this, I will what? As a result, not as a result of this, I'm screwed. As a result of this, I can't do things as fast as others. As a result of this, I'm always behind. As a result of this, I'm never going to succeed. Those are options, but are they going to get you where you want to go? As a result of this, I'm going to become even more master of my focus, even more crystal clear of my intentions. I have to define my goals and vision and make a plan and become disciplined more than somebody without this. And at first I could say that's not fair, or I could go, as a result of that, I'm going to become a master of focus, intention, discipline, etc. I'm going to refine and define and design my life so that it is a masterpiece of alignment with who and what I really am. Those other people, I feel sorry for them that they don't have ADHD because they don't have to do the rigor. They're not forced to dig a deeper well and tap that life stream of possibility and potential. I hope they get some other kind of challenge because, you see, so you can change the story. And that's not bullshit. That's actually potentially real. That's just me riffing, but that's what's possible. And the same with what's happening to America. We can tell a story, it's, as I said, it's gone to hell in a handbasket. You know where that term comes from, by the way? When they used to cut people's heads off in a guillotine and the head would roll into a basket. Sorry for that image, but sorry, not sorry. Got to know where your phrases come from. So, yeah, America's going through a transformation initiation, and that's a good thing. The question is, if you want to be in service of the greater America, you number one, want to do what we're doing today. Number two, you want to look for leaders and people who are looking behind the scene, beneath the headline. They're not just trying to get clicks and likes and voted in, but they're being leaders. That's what Dr. King did. That's what Robert Kennedy was doing. That's what Gandhi, Mandela, and all these. There's not a lot of real statesmen and women around these days, but there are some. So you want to find somebody first as best you can. You want to discern what's the vision trying to emerge. And that takes a little work. But let me tell you, you know how much energy we spend and waste on the story that hurts us and everybody? So let's just take that currency and invest it in doing the work, like showing up here and actually doing something after this, not just getting entertained and then going back to your old story, but getting down to what's the story trying to emerge in America? What's the new story, the better story, the truer story? And then start to look for people that seem to be aligned in some way, shape, or form with that. That doesn't mean they're not speaking truth to pseudo power. They're not saying this is corrupt, this is not okay. But be mindful, they're not also weaving in a story that's just going to make somebody else the victim or somebody else the perpetrator. If you have a story about a victim and a perpetrator, you have a story that is unsustainable. If you have a story that is just polarity, good versus evil, it's unsustainable. It all goes back to that original story, Adam and Eve, good versus evil. They ate of the knowledge of good and evil. Who told you were naked? God says. You're not naked. Who made you believe, oh, you ate of that tree? I told you not to do that. And now you have to fall asleep. And nowhere in Genesis does it say they woke up. They fell into history, his story, what's called the Adamic dream. And the human experience is a story. It's a mental construct. So we have to be mindful of the story we're telling, believing, following, entertaining, or being entertained by. All right. Let's see. Fear of scarcity. Yeah, and again, it's understandable, right? And so what that means, fear is a signal you're believing a lie, not instinctual fear, not the fear where you're walking down an alley and you get chills and you're like, I better duck in and get out of here. And then you learn next day somebody was mugged. That's instinctual, and it's also very rare. But mostly fear is a signal that says you're believing a lie. So you want to let that fear have a voice, write it down. Oh, there's not enough to go around, and then dig it. Like, why do I believe that? Oh, because when I was a kid, and look at, I have all these examples. And you want to begin to define what is the story behind that fear of scarcity. It's a belief there's not enough. It's a belief that we're separate. It's a signal that you're believing a lie, or at best, you're believing a limited story. But that fear, that lie, that limitation story is pointing to a better story, to a truth. If I was not afraid of scarcity anymore, what would I be? What would I have? What would my life be? I would have wealth, abundance, and you define that for you. And then you go, and if I had that life, who would I be? How would I think if I was the character in that story? What would I do? What would I stop doing? What would I talk about? What would I stop talking about? What would I focus on? What would I no longer focus on? Et cetera, et cetera. And so as I tell the story, two people are walking by this empty, dilapidated lot. One is like a real estate developer, a successful real estate developer. The other one is an angry activist against the elites. And they see this empty lot, and it's, dirty and an old shoe and, whatever. And the activist like, see, look at what they've done to our city. I'm going to start a protest and a petition and, take down these bad elites and slumlords and all that they've done to the city. And the other real estate broker thinks to himself or herself, wow, that's an empty lot. And they see a beautiful hotel or office building or something that could serve a lot of people, make them wealthy, more successful, but also add to the tax base of the city that could then fund all the other needs of the city more, right? Because you have all these people working, you have all these contractors, construction workers, office people, you name it. And if it's like a hotel, people coming and staying there and getting great experiences and coming to the city, and all of that pours back into the city as taxes, and it allows them to have more money to feed the poor and help the homeless. That's what they see. This other person sees how terrible the city is, how it's gone to hell, how these bad people have done all this bad stuff. Cut to a year, 2, 3 years later, the activist is finding another terrible place to attack and protest. And again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't protest at times and all that, but here's the point. And that developer is cutting the ribbon on this beautiful hotel that is now going to add value to the city and to everybody that comes there. So that's just a different where they're coming from, because they have different stories. One has a story of lack and scarcity and separation. One has a story of abundance. Now, if you have a reaction to me telling that story, yeah, Derek, but they're also taking money from, what's the story you're telling? How's that working for you? You can always find a bad version, a way to look at something. And you can also always find a good way. That doesn't mean everybody's doing everything good or everything perfect. That person might be, building a beautiful thing that pays taxes and does all these things, and they're cheating on their taxes, or they didn't put in the proper smog alerts and the thing could catch fire one day. Or yes, there's always a way, or whatever, they're using their money to repress somebody over here. There's always a way to look at it but if you notice the way you're looking at it, that's telling you about your story. So use it as a Rorschach test. Use it as a mirror. Oh, that's a stupid story, Derek. Those corrupt real estate people and building all these buildings, they're not doing it for anybody's good. Okay. So what's the story underneath that you have about life, about success, about wealth? Now you extract it from the headline and you discover your story. And now you'll be like, holy crap, no wonder, right? And so that's what I'm inviting you to do. And argue back, push back if you don't understand what I'm saying or you think I'm full of it. This is all, because I have a story too, right? I have a bias. I have a frame of reference. Everything I say is not true. Nothing of I say is true in the ultimate sense, but you're looking for the next best story, and that is trying to emerge in you or in the world, that is life affirmative, because life is life affirmative. And that means if you align with that story, life is at your back. You have the wind at your back. If you align with a story that's anti-life, that's separation, polarization, lack, limitation, you're fighting life. You always are fighting a headwind. You're always rolling a boulder up a hill that's going to roll over you on the way down. You understand? Okay. Let's see. So Thea Stammer says, so I can completely invent a story. Oops, where'd you go? Invent a story for myself. Isn't this wishful thinking? Great question. I didn't say invent a story, right? This is not, a vision isn't something you go to a weekend workshop and just make up. The vision of your life is what you're made of. The acorn doesn't go, what should I be? It is an oak tree, but it can't go against its nature. So if it surrenders to the soil and the conditions are right, oak emerges. There's a pattern in you. You are made for something, right? There's a reason why even if somebody came to me and offered me $10 million to be a fighter pilot, I would say, thank you, no. Maybe I'll try it out, just play around with it, but no thanks, or whatever, right? I'm not made for that. So you're made for something, and you're made of something, like the acorn, like the apple seed, like the rose seed. So you're not making it up. You're not wishing it to be so. That's part of the problem with a lot of the self-help law of attraction stuff, and people, trying to manifest. They're trying to manifest a lot of things that aren't even their true nature. And nature will never grow anything that is going against its nature. It can't. Nature can't make an acorn become an apple tree. Jesus couldn't make that happen, right? And so nature can't make you into something you're not. And many of the things you're trying to be are conditioned from the stories of your parents and peers and society. And many of the things we're struggling with and are things that we're not made to. Quick aside, AI is going to be one of the most existential identity crises, disrupting things of ever. So that's the bad news. But the good news is, and it's going to do everything a human can do better, faster, cheaper, or at least everything humans have identified with as valuable, especially in the marketplace. But the good news, it's going to force us to strip away everything we were never meant to be. And it'll make us ask the only question that's going to matter: what's a human really for? And then, what am I really for? Because what you're really for, what a human's really for, nothing else can replace. And so But that takes time. That's why, going back to the Oracle of Delphi, know thyself. And it was a warning. And that warning is more important now, more prescient now than ever before. Know yourself. Let's see. Yes, the story about the activist. Well, of course, it's a story. I mean, the story about the activist focusing on scarcity. Now, understand, Darcy, it's a little meta what you're saying, what you're asking there. I'm obviously telling you a story as an analogy. There isn't actually a historical document about this activist and this developer walking past an empty lot. It's an analogy. And analogies are meant to serve something, but they're not facts. But like a myth, a great myth isn't a true story, but it's truer than most real stories because it's bringing forth an archetypal pattern. So in that example, I'm giving you an example of an activist who has a story of scarcity and of lack because that's their conditioning. And you know those people, right? Where they're coming from a wound. They're coming from a core wound. There's not enough to go around. And that looks true. You can find all kinds of evidence for there's not enough to go around. Look at those people starving. Look at those people thriving. They have 50,000 times more than those people. And from that wound and the story you might create from it, because you can create different stories. If you create the story, because remember also evolutionarily, the brain and the mind are designed to look for cause. It doesn't mean it's actually finding the real cause, but it will assign it post hoc after the fact. So it's like all these starving people, all these ruinous apartment buildings, whatever. Let me decide why and who is to blame. And depending on your wound and the story you've developed or the culture you've been raised in and the parents, etc., you've been conditioned with a story that says rich people did that, or the government did that, or bad politics did that, or socialism did that. Without going into all the effects, we can see that socialism, by and large, has murdered tens of millions of people and left them broken in poverty. Whereas capitalism, for all of its terrible, corrupt elements, has lifted the most people out of poverty. Now, that's a story, but if you look underneath the hood, you'll see it's more life affirmative. Now, this person who, you said a story of love for those people, that person that wants to develop that area could also be doing it from love. So then you have to go, well, do I believe you can be of true service to people and be of true love and also be an entrepreneur or charge for my services or be wealthy? Do I believe it's only okay if everybody has the same as me? Do I believe it's okay as long as nobody else is suffering? So now you start to drill down, well, what's my real story? Again, this is not about what's right or wrong. It's about what's the story and what's the one that's most aligned with the principle or premise that all of life is conspiring for good, for flourishing, for flowering. And again, I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm not saying believe left or right, capitalist, communist, socialist, Democrat, Republican, entrepreneurial versus artistic versus being a hippie. I'm not saying what's right or wrong. I'm saying they're all stories. And you want to continue to evolve your story to find a story that can hold more and more of reality. Okay? And that ultimately is life affirmative. Like the Me Too movement. It started for a good reason. Women needed to speak up, stand up, and tell men to back the you-know-what off and take their power back. Yes, that's an empowered story. It started with a better story about women and naming the facts about men. But if you follow that story, it evolved to men bad, women victims. And we're right back to the same old story, just at a different level. As I like to say, you have a bigger paycheck, but now you're just broke at a higher income bracket. So we got to be careful. I hope this makes sense. I mean, we can have endless permutations of this conversation, and that's why I'm doing this show, and I'm going to try to do it every week, because this takes a journey of really understanding. And most of the inability to understand is where we're bumping into a story of our own. So we want to unpack that. I'm not sure what that response is, Tom, except valuable stuff like empathy, genuine connection. So that's interesting. So even there, Tom, in that, and I don't know where that's coming from. Maybe it's following off of your proactivist statement, but you're saying, but notice even in that statement, that's a value statement. It's except the valuable stuff like empathy, genuine connection. Really, is that all that's valuable? Is it not valuable to eat? Is it not value? And I'm not saying it should be. It's all about what do you value? And it's not an either or. Remember the values conflicts work that we've done. You can have wealth and you can have love. You can have empathy and genuine connection, and you can have abundance and success. Nowhere is it so that those are mutually exclusive, except in our story. Oh, right. That's right, Tom. Yeah. So AI is, well, actually, funnily enough, AI is statistically better at empathy. I won't go into the statistics right now, but humans are preferring it from an empathetic standpoint. They're preferring it, and they're showing statistically how it's better at empathy. But again, as I said, AI will be able to do everything humans have done better, faster, cheaper, at least the things that have been mostly identified as valuable, especially in the marketplace. But what it will do is it will strip away, force us to discover what is valuable about humans, about me, that AI can never do. And as I teach, you carry a unique algorithm, your life code, your lived wisdom. The wounds carry deep wisdom. The pain carries the seed of your legendary purpose, your authenticity, your taste, your perceptions. All of that is something only you can bring. And then, yes, there's human touch, and there's energetic connections, and there's all these things that will become more valuable. And that's why I believe it can lead to a whole new renaissance, a human renaissance. It will be able to allow us to become what we have always meant to become, at least the next iteration of that. Jesus may have been the first coming, but the second coming isn't a man on a cloud. It's more of us awakening to our Christhood, Buddhahood, loving nature, generosity, etc., and actually seeing that as the new currency, as the new wealth, right? Hope that makes sense. No, I'm not saying the Me Too movement made all men bad. See, even this is, just notice, there's no way for me to say anything that says everything, right? I could just talk about one sentence and write a whole book to make sure every possible perception is covered so nobody thinks that I'm saying the wrong thing. So just notice your response to what I'm saying. Doesn't mean you're not right. It's all a Rorschach test. No, but that did exacerbate, the Me Too movement exacerbated the toxic masculine identity and story. And if you study the history since then and the social situation and where men are now, you can trace it in part, that's not the only cause, to some of the real crisis that men are in right now. I'm not saying it's not great for women are rocking it right now statistically. They're doing better than men on a lot of metrics, and yay, I'm all for that. But you can see the downside. Same with the Black Lives Matter and the whole racial conversation, which literally went against Dr. King, judge a person by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Now, increasingly, we judge people by the color of their skin. And now, so that's another example of the story. And these stories come around, and sometimes we'll cycle back around and try to hook us with just better packaging. So we have to be mindful. Is this story going to empower people and lead to the outcomes we want. And I'm not saying sometimes the story doesn't have to include, you did a bad thing, that's not okay, you need to have the consequences. But that's not the end of the story. That's like act one. So we got to make sure we're telling a story, therefore, right? Like even putting people in prison, you can close the door of the cell, but the story we tell about prisoners and criminals, we close the doors of our hearts. And that's a problem. And that's why recidivism and criminality isn't going up. Prisons are. So we have to be mindful. It's a story that we bought into. And I love all your comments. You can critique me, push back, feedback. If you have and by the way, I want to encourage you not just to say that's stupid or that's wrong or just to do a little bit of make a case. Make your case for why you think what I'm saying is inaccurate or limited or wrong for two reasons. One, I want to change my story too. I want to improve and expand and have a story, which is to say, have a model of life that is more closely hewn to cause and effect, to the laws of physics or metaphysics, and ultimately that's going to lead to the greater outcome that I really want for me in the world. And I know that my model will never be perfect, but it's seriously flawed. I have frames of references that I'm coming from. So that's the first reason for this community. I want you to challenge, not just accept, but when you challenge it, the second reason is I want you to make, as best you can, and I'll help you if you need help, make a rigorous case for the pushback. Why? Because that helps you see your frame of reference, your story, and it helps all of us see, ooh, that actually makes more sense. And not just that, not just it makes sense within my frame of reference, but it, best as I can, that will get us to the outcome we really want. Now, we don't all want the same outcomes. So that's why I want this to be rigorous. It's not just me teaching at you. It's a conversation. I'm laying out some principles and stuff, but I want to be challenged. I want to expand. And it also allows me to sharpen my sword, to make the case even better, to see where I've got blind spots, to see where I am not articulating it. And back and forth we go, but the purpose isn't, Derek, you suck, or you're stupid. That's not helpful to any of us. The purpose is, I think I have a better model. I think I see something you don't. And then we all get to see a little more of something so that we all get to expand our story. Does that make sense? I didn't say that the last time, and I wanted to iterate that this time. I'm just going to take a couple more here and then we'll wrap it up. I'm going to eventually, I know I say this all the time, make these shorter, but because I'm laying in so much framework, these first 2 or 3 episodes might be a little longer. Don't forget to like it, to subscribe so you get the notifications, and so that other people can find this, so that we can all start challenging our stories. Let's see. Perhaps. So as Hentibra says, perhaps there's no good, or what we think is bad is just life. Yeah, so in reality, even from a quantum physics, neuroscientific level, there is no good or bad. There's quantum wave fluctuations. There's superposition in quantum theory. And that means it's Schrodinger's cat. It's dead and alive at the same time and everything in between. And so it's called a superposition. It's everything, it's everywhere, it's nowhere, it's everything everywhere all at once. And it's nothing and it's everything at the same time. It's a superposition. Attention or measurement or observation collapses that superposition. What does that mean? It turns an infinite potential into an actual particle or wave of experience, of reality, something that's measurable. Now, what is it that collapses it? The story. The scientist or whoever is looking for something, expecting something, coming from something, and looking through something, an instrument or other beliefs. And for us, where attention goes, energy flows. right? So your story is collapsing infinity into a thing. That's not a bad thing. That's how you experience life. There's no experience outside of a story. There's just isness. But the belief in good and evil, meaning in duality, in two powers, which is what the allegory of the Garden of Eden is trying to point to, and this has been made in other allegories, that belief is the roots of all human suffering. This is what Buddha was also teaching. He said desire is the root of suffering, but he broke desire down fundamentally into craving and aversion. I want more of the good, and I got to get rid of the bad. The belief in good and evil is the fundamental program of the human egoic program, right? And of the collective. And so that's fundamentally is the problem. Every story, though, that we tell on some level, perhaps you can tell a story that doesn't have this at some point. It has that polarity, but it's a better version of it. So changing your story is good, but it's not the ultimate. And we're not going all the way down the rabbit hole here. I have in other areas. Ultimately, you will never truly be free until you have no story. This is what Byron Katie is teaching. Who would you be without your story? This is what Jesus was teaching. This is what Buddha is teaching. It's called equanimity. It's called I don't want and I don't want. And Joel Goldsmith, another mystic, you let go of loving, hating, or fearing anything. Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Is that Shakespeare? So thinking, the story you're telling, collapses it into something we call good or something we call bad. All right. So we are swapping out better stories, but we're not making them up. We're hearing the signal in the noise, and then we're aligning and serving what's trying to emerge. And so each of those iterations will not only be a better, more expanded story, but it will incrementally liberate us from the need to have any opinion at all, i.e. any story. So that's the journey of full awakening. Let's see. Via Stammer, the story of searching for safety and freedom at the same time, but being completely conflicted. Yeah. And so that's a values conflict. It's a belief early on and a story that says you can either be free and in danger, or you can be safe and not free. Some version of that. You got early on, you had an experience. Maybe you were just being free and loving, and some might say naive, and then you got smacked upside the head or abandoned or betrayed or rejected or taken advantage of or something, abused. And the message of that experience was not safe to be me, to be free, to be open, etc. So I'll find some degree of freedom in a very contained way, but mostly I'm going to be more protected. But nevertheless, that urge and impulse for freedom, which is a part of your original pattern, it doesn't go away. Energy is never destroyed or created. It just gets transferred, projected. And you have to tell a story that includes freedom and safety. The more free and fully expressed and alive and trusting in life that I am, the more safe I am. And the more I do my due diligence to have healthy boundaries and to be authentic, to make sure that I'm taken care of, the more free I get to be. So freedom and constraints are not mutually exclusive. They're necessary. Freedom without constraints is chaos. As Janis Joplin said, freedom is just another name for nothing left to lose, right? Freedom without constraints is chaos. Constraints without freedom is oppression, okay? So you need the balance of both. That's what we're trying to do in a democracy. It's what's called sovereign unity, freedom and commitment. It's a container that creates just enough freedom to make a mess and make mistakes and learn and grow and evolve, but not so much that it just collapses or blows up. That's what we're trying to do in a good relationship, in a good company, in a good community, culture, or country. That's the experiment of what democracy is about. But even in a relationship, you ultimately have to find that with a partner. Let's see. I'll do one more. Let's see. Visible to all, many in those who know I like, revealed, coming to the surface better. Black Lives Matter did not create the thing. Absolutely. That's a good point. Thank you. When I'm saying these examples like the Me Too movement or Black Lives Matter or woke culture or Trumpism or left, right, center, it doesn't matter. It's true that the experience doesn't cause, just like, was it back with the Rodney King thing where Rodney King was beat up and then, LA started burning down with protests. Rodney King beating didn't cause the protests and the burning of LA. It created a condition that allowed for what was implicit to become explicit. What was being held back to suddenly get unleashed. It was an apocalypse. So you're speaking to exactly what I'm trying to say. So their symptoms and their revelations of what's underneath. And it's not always a good thing that comes out. As I said earlier, when the lid comes off, sometimes what has to come out first are all the demons because they're being repressed. And energy is not destroyed or created. It just gets projected and expressed in other weird ways. So yes, like the Rodney King example, all of that racism and all of that repression and anger against the system, all justified based on the facts, but it was repressed. And that was the thing that lit the match. That was the thing that took off the lid. And so that was already there. Another way to think of it is when the wind blows and the apple falls off the tree to the ground, the wind didn't cause the apple to fall. The apple is always being pulled by gravity, an invisible force. The wind created a condition that loosened it enough that the pull of gravity could become manifest. And so absolutely, the Me Too or any of these things, Black Lives, that was some incident happened that caused the repression, the anger, the injustice, whatever to come up. And that starts a movement. What's the thing about what was that one? Something Wall Street. I forget the name of that movement as well. The Boston Tea Party. These different things, and this is American culture. But yeah, so it comes up as an eruption, and that can then turn into, a new rule, a new law, a new movement, even war, and even a whole new country. So that eruption is part of it, right? Like the fever that has to break at first, or has to happen at first because there's a virus. The challenge is then we can tend to, that eruption comes with a story, injustice and all these things. And that story serves as a tool for the moment. You need to tell the truth. Women are being repressed. People of color are being unjustly done to. The planet is being raped and plundered. The oceans are dying. Yes, that's a fact. But now we don't want to hold on to the story of these people are victims and these people are perpetrators and the world is going to hell in a handbasket again, because now we just polarize again into another version of the same kind of story. We have to have a bigger story. Again, the example I use is Malcolm X and Dr. King. Dr. King was no wimp. Gandhi was no wimp. They're like, this isn't okay. But Dr. King and other leaders, because there were many others that were part of this, were telling a bigger story. They were telling a more life-aligned story. It wasn't white people bad or Europeans bad. That didn't work. And we see what happens now in the pushback and the outlash. It doesn't work. It doesn't help anybody. It creates a disempowering story on both sides. That's what eventually a lot of the echo of a Black Lives Matter or a Me Too or a lot of these movements, if they're not sustainable, they become. I hope that makes sense. I'm not saying we don't need to have the eruption, but that condition, there's usually a fuse or a trigger that causes it. Not Rodney King, but the other individual that was by the cops that was drawing a blank now on his name. I'm sure somebody will post it. He was, pinned down and until he died, and that really broke through as the movement, mostly the Black Lives Matter movement. Necessary, but we have to recognize that story, like the right tool, isn't forever. And if you don't update it and expand it and include context, you're going to tell an old story again, and you're going to cause regression instead of progression, right? Okay, I hope that makes sense. Keep pushing back, though. Those are great. I think that's good for now, because, I could go on, and I usually do. It could be 5 hours later, but I want to try to honor people and also myself time-wise. Please subscribe, like, share. Occupy Wall Street. Thank you, Caroline. Listen again. If it's triggering you, yes, that's an opportunity. Again, I'm not right. If it resonates, cool. If you think I'm a jerk, but you can't help listening to me, great. If it's triggering you, yes, that's all part of the process. But my invitation is, there's a lot of things I'm saying that are not opinion, they're principle. You can actually follow the cause and effect. Focus mostly on that and learn it, practice it. And then, when I'm talking about some issues and giving you my perspective or example, if it triggers you, go back to the principle. Oh yeah, if something triggers me, this is how I can work with it so that I'm not a victim and I'm not polarizing and I'm not just angry or mad or sad or trolling or whatever. But this is a gift to me. Thanks, Derek, for being the asshole that I needed so I could see part of me, whatever the case may be. That's the alchemical process here. So you engage, you push back, you give feedback, you get triggered, you go within, you learn, you go back, you listen to the principles. If you really want to be a master of reading the world, which makes you a master at reading yourself and others, which makes you a master at getting to the story behind the headlines, behind the scene, which means getting back to the perfect pattern of infinite power and potential, seeking to emerge in the world and in you. If you want that, you're in the right place. But apply yourself, listen, take notes, practice, come back with your challenges, your struggles, push back. And over time, my commitment, if you keep showing up, if I'm just doing this to nobody, it's not going to work. My commitment is to help you become a master at this. And I believe it's never been more important. The most potent and powerful time to become a master at this is in the midst of an unveiling, of an apocalypse, where all that's been hidden is now being revealed. The corruption, the lies, the demons, and the deeper story of possibility. So I love and appreciate you. I'll see you soon. See you next week. Until then, remember to live authentically, love unconditionally, follow your destiny. And I know some people wanted to ask about how they can get the music. I'll come up with a way, but I'll play a little bit more as we head out. Oh, where is it? Oh, I turned it off.
Is a door, and every fear you swore you'd ignore is the exact thing you were born to explore.
Listen to the
This
words.
is the uproar before the encore, yeah.
Listen to the words.
When you spoke your vision here, it wasn't a post, it was a pulse of both through the collective skull, reminding every soul they're whole, holy and fully capable of taking back what was stolen. Yeah, I said it boldly, your vision's on goals that rose in a storyline that's unfolding slowly, where every one of you is the only one who can hold the thing you hold. That's why I feel so heavy, that's why I feel so scary. Gold does, fire does, truth does, becoming does. Look, these dreams life you now live. Yeah. You're not starting the program, you're starting the movement. Human improvement, soul attunement. Shadow to sunlight, truth and recruitment. You're not finding clients, you're finding alignment. When you shine, they find you, that's refinements of assignment. You're not doing the work, you're dropping the hurt. Letting the true self emerge from the dirt. Like, yo, this is who I am, this is what I'm worth. And suddenly the world starts to convert. Yeah. So here's the verdict. This group, not a circle, a circuit, a current of resurgence, a chorus of divergence, souls convergent, in purpose, a room full of women, men, and in-betweeners, who've been dreamers and healers and silent screamers, now stepping into the arena with sovereign truth carriers, identity re-engineers, heart bringers, fear singers, shadow bringing greaters, future generators. This is a movement of humans becoming their own creators. So stand tall, or don't. Cause some of you are tired of proving you're strong. Maybe the real flex is the trust fall, letting yourself fall into the self that's been calling all along. This is your song, this is your dawn. This is that moment right before the world catches on. And we're all right here, rising in sync, becoming the ones we were born to be. The moment we finally let ourselves think and feel and heal. Yo, look around.
Love you guys. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.